This is a demonstration of problem 629A, comparing amounts for cost of goods sold, ending inventory, and gross profit using FIFO, LIFO, and weighted average, and this is the perpetual inventory method. The problem states that Steel Mill began August with 50 units of iron inventory that cost $35 each, and during August the company made the following transactions. So the problem gives us information for each of these sales and purchases that were made by Steel Mill in August. So the first requirement, it requires us to compute cost of goods sold, cost of ending merchandise inventory, and gross profit using the FIFO inventory costing method. So I have set up my spreadsheet to help us to calculate the ending inventory, cost of goods sold, and then we'll calculate the gross profit. So at the beginning of the month, it stated in the problem that the company had 50 units on hand that cost $35 each. So $1,750 in total cost for inventory on hand. Then on the 3rd, they sold 45 units. Since we only had 50 units at 35, that has to be the cost of the units that were sold. So 45 times 35 would give us total cost of goods sold for the sale of $1,575. We would still have 5 units left, 50 minus 45, and we would cost those at the $35. So after the sale, we have $175 in merchandise inventory. On August the 8th, the problem stated that we purchased 90 units at $54 each. So 90 times 54 is $4,860. We have on hand after that purchase 5 units that were $35 each, and we have the 90 units that we just purchased at $54 each. So adding these two amounts together, our ending inventory or merchandise inventory on hand is $5,035. Then on the 21st, the problem states that we sold 85 units. So under FIFO, it states that the first units in are the first ones out. So we would take our oldest inventory, our 5 units, and we would take those first, 5 at 35, and cost out that much. And then we would take the additional 80 units, because a total of 85 were sold, and those would be costed at the newer amount of $54. So the total cost of goods sold for this sale would be $4,495. What we would have on hand after that would be 10 units. We sold all 5 of these and we sold 80 of these, so we would have 10 left at $54. So after that sale, we have $540 of merchandise inventory on hand. Then on the 30th, it states that we made another purchase of 15 units at $58 each. So we would cost that out at $870, and our merchandise inventory would consist of 10 units at $54 and 15 units, the new purchase, at $58. So when we add those amounts together, extend the amounts and add them together, our ending inventory for August using FIFO perpetual method would be $1,410. Requirements 4 and 5 asked us to give the cost of goods sold under requirement 4 and then the gross profit. So the cost of goods sold would be equal to the cost of goods sold for the August 3rd sale of $1,575 plus the cost of goods sold for the sale on August 21st of $4,495. And the spreadsheet has added those two amounts together and it's $6,070. To compute the gross profit, we first need to compute the revenue. So the problem told us that on August 3rd, we sold 45 units and we sold those for $85 each. Then on the 21st, we sold 85 units at $88 each. So that information is coming from what we were given in the problem. So when we extend those amounts, we get $3,825 for the August 3rd sale and $7,480 for the August 21st sale, and total revenue for the month of August of $11,305. So that 11,305 will not change no matter which inventory method you use. So I won't calculate that again, but you can see how we calculated it, and you will see that same amount when we do LIFO and weighted average. When we subtract the cost of goods sold, 6,070, from revenue of $11,305, we get gross profit, which was requirement 5 under FIFO, of $5,235. Next, under requirement 2, we're going to do the same thing that we did in requirement 1, but we're going to use LIFO inventory costing method. So we start out at the beginning of the month again with 50 units at $35 each. And then on the 3rd, we sell 45 units. They would still be costed at $35 because that's the only inventory we had on hand and they all cost the same amount. That would still leave 5 units at $35 in ending inventory, which would be $175. And then we make the additional purchase on the 8th of 90 units, and we pay $54 for those. So we have on hand 5 units at $35 and 90 units at $54. Okay, now we make the sale on August 21st of 85 units. Now when we use LIFO, LIFO says the last units in were the first to be sold. So the last units that were bought were the 90 at 54. So for this inventory costing method, we're going to cost all 85 units at the $54 per unit. Then the inventory that we would have on hand would be the 5 units at 35 and 5 at 54. Okay, so LIFO, you take the newest units. So that would leave the old units that we already had and then 5 of the new units. Then it says on the 30th, we purchased 15 units again at $58 each. So now our ending inventory for the month is going to be the 5 units at 35, 5 units at 54, and then the 15 units that we just bought at 58. So LIFO ending inventory would be $1,315. So that is the answer for ending inventory. Cost of goods sold would be $6,165, which would be the total of the cost of goods sold on the 3rd of $1,575 plus the cost of goods sold for the 21st sale of $4,590. Our gross profit, which we need for requirement 5, would be equal to the sales revenue, which is still the same, minus the cost of goods sold under LIFO, and gross profit would be equal to $5,140 using LIFO. The last method is the one we will use for requirement 3, and that is weighted average. So we will compute cost of goods sold and ending inventory and gross profit using the weighted average inventory costing method. Again, we are going to start out at the beginning of the month with 50 units at $35 each, and we would sell 45 units again at $35 each and have 5 units on hand at $35 each. Now for weighted average, when you make a purchase, you're going to have to compute a new weighted average for your inventory. So the problem states that on the 8th, we purchased 90 units at $54 each. So before we can cost our ending inventory, we need to calculate a weighted average per unit. So how do you do that? You take the total of the cost of your ending inventory that you had on hand, which was $175, plus the total cost of the purchases, which is $4,860. And when you add those two together, you get a total for cost of goods available for sale of $5,035. You divide that by the total number of units on hand. We had 5 units in ending inventory and we bought 90 units. So our total units available is 95. So 5,035 divided by 95 is $53. So our inventory, which consists of 95 units, will all be costed at $53 each. So our total inventory on hand would be $5,035. Now you will use that weighted average inventory cost, $53, to cost out any sales that you make after that point and your inventory until you make a new purchase. So the sale on the 21st of 85 units, those units would be costed at $53 each. And then the inventory that is left, 10 units, so 95 minus 85, would also be costed at $53 each. So ending inventory would be $530. Now on the 30th, we make another purchase. So again, when you use weighted average, every time you make a purchase, you have to compute a new weighted average. We bought 15 units at $58 each, so we compute a new weighted average. So how did we compute the weighted average now? We take the cost of the inventory on hand, $530, plus the total cost of the inventory we bought, which is $870, and that gives us a total cost of goods available for sale of $1,400. We then divide that by the total number of units available. So 10 units were in ending inventory and we bought 15, so that's 25 units. So our ending inventory would be 25 units, and our weighted average that we computed by dividing 1,400 by 25 is now $56. So 25 times 56 is $1,400. So for requirement 3, the ending inventory using weighted average is $1,400. Requirement 4 was the cost of goods sold. So we add the 1575 and the 4505 for the two cost of goods sold for those two sales, and we get 6,080 using weighted average. So when we subtract that from our revenue, as we had previously calculated, of $11,305, we get gross profit using weighted average, which is requirement 5, of $5,225. Requirement 6 asked if the business wanted to maximize gross profit, which method would it choose? So I have copied down for each of the three methods the amount we calculated for gross profit. The revenue was all the same. Cost of goods sold, of course, was different under the three methods. When prices are rising, we know that FIFO will produce the highest gross profit. So if the business wants to maximize gross profit, they would want to select FIFO. And that is the conclusion of the demonstration for problem 629A.